Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, everyone, no matter where you are in the world. Today we have a special segment. We're speaking to Mr. Richea Perry, who is a GRC professional. For those who don't know, that's government governance, risk, and compliance. And today he's our special guest. Richie, I just want to say it is a privilege to have you on. I know you put out some good content and you provide some good education around cybersecurity and around the GRC. And so we wanted to get you on to kind of to one, hear about your story, but two, to get your feedback on how things are going possibly in different parts of the world, or what you're seeing right now within cybersecurity. So again, welcome and thank you for being on our show today.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks for taking the time to, have this conversation, for having reaching out to me. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to this wonderful conversation that we will no doubt be having as we go along. So I definitely appreciate the fact that you're actually having this conversation with me.
Good. So GRC. So we know that GRC stands for government's risk management and compliance. And it's a strategic approach that organizations use to manage and align their activities related to governments, to risk assessments, and to regulatory compliance, right? And at the end of the day, it seems that GRC is about ensuring that organizations, or the operations of organizations, are conducted in a way that minimizes risk and kind of adheres to kind of legal and regulatory requirements. So when you think of GRC, is there anything else that's missing to that, or how do you, when you work with GRC and different projects and different companies on a day-to-day basis, what do you see that GRC really means to an organization?
Great. That's a very important question. Well, GRC, I think of GRC as the lifeblood of organizations. Mm. And many people might not really understand it from that perspective, and this is why. You have various departments, you have various policies, you have various procedures, you have various ways of doing things. Mm-hmm. Now, in the midst of all of these segmented operations, there are a number of risks that exist. So if you do not have that cohesiveness, if everyone is not in alignment, if everyone doesn't understand the overall objectives of the organization, why it is that we are in business, what it is that we are trying to achieve, what space are we operating in, what is it that we need to be in alignment with, what are the things that could actually affect us from a risk perspective that could actually put us out of business, all of these things. So I like to think of GRC as that lifeblood, or that glue that actually binds together the various segregations or silos that exist within companies, organizations, so that everyone is actually on the same path in terms of understanding what you're about as an organization. So it actually breaks down that level of chaos and confusion, which I've often seen so many times within organization. This department A is doing something different, department B is doing something different. However, there's operating to say that we are a business or we are an organization, but there's so much disparity that exists, which in of itself leads to, risk at an enterprise level versus within various departments that actually builds the overall machinery of an organization or business. So I like to see GRC as that lifeblood, that bonding agent that keeps organization operating in a way that minimizes risk at an enterprise level.
Okay, all right. And as a GRC professional, someone who was intimately involved, I know you're well versed in managing risk and ensuring compliance. So how do you see the evolving cyber threat landscape? How do you see that affecting businesses, some of your customers?
Well, it will continue to, I would say, become more challenging based on the fact that as technology increases, so the risk, when it comes down to, for example, the DevOps side of things, development, then the executives, marketing management are pushing more, products into the market. They need the fastest app to be working without even thinking about the various cyber risk. Is all about getting that thing out so that we can generate revenue. So you will always have that variety of risk. But the challenge when it comes down to GRC or the compliance side is that compliance does not keep abreast as fast as the rapid change at which cybersecurity incident actually take place in terms of that threat vector. The threat landscape is actually evolving faster than. So, for example, an organization maybe within the financial sector, they have to be compliant with PCI DSS, but PCI DSS is a compliance standard, which is only revised so often. I think last year was it last year or this year, they actually created a new version of PCI DSS compliance.
Okay.
So you can see that gap, that distance behind that overall revision. But between those revisions, there are thousands of different threats, thousands of different cybersecurity breaches. So many, attacks are actually affecting organizations. So that is where the gap is in terms of compliance, keeping up with security and the threat landscape. That's the biggest challenge that organizations will have. Okay, go ahead.
So what I hear you saying is that cybersecurity is becoming much more sophisticated and it's moving at a breakneck speed, bottom line. And when it comes to the governing bodies, that many times you don't see that they're keeping up with the pace that you see on a day-to-day when it comes to those the cyber landscape. And so that's probably and that becomes a vulnerability in some respect, right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Yeah. That's a good viewpoint and good perspective from there. In your experience, do you see any difference in how GRC and cybersecurity differ between whether it be regions or even in industries?
It depends on the region. For example, within for example, I think in the EMEA, I think it's MEA, I think it's Europe, Middle East, and Africa, those areas. When you and also in the United States, when you align that, for example, with the Caribbean, right? It's a total different scenario based on the fact that I think, for example, us in the Caribbean, we still are trying to get to that point of making that differentiation between cybersecurity versus IT. No, we are talking about governance, risk, and compliance. When you go to, for example, in Europe, in the Middle East, there's a better understanding and appreciation of GRC. There's a more stringent framework, or within the industries are far more regulated. There are more compliance requirements that organizations, industries definitely will have to meet. So as a result of this, companies will try to be PCI compliant, ISO 27001 compliance, SOX compliant. All of these various regulations affect the way it is that they do business. So I think there is more, I would want to say, trying to find the best word. There is more that level of let me see, that level of, there's a greater priority that is placed on ensuring that the business operations have the necessary resources and capabilities in place to meet all of these demands versus, for example, talking about, within the Caribbean, talking about working from my background experience, trying to make that comparison, that alignment. There's a great disparity in terms of really getting the concept, really understanding when we're talking about, but the fact is that, from my background, when you talk about cybersecurity, everything is jumbled in one. First, let's talk about IT, that's it. Go to the IT department. IT is responsible for cybersecurity. IT is responsible for GRC. IT is responsible for, you name it. There's no differentiation. So that language of communicating, making those differentiation, ensuring that executive management understand the differences, that's where the challenges lie in comparison to on a larger, first world scale, as they would say.
So I read an article some months ago, and just give me a little time to bring it back up in my memory. But the article, it was from, there were a couple of articles. I think one from Gartner, one from Forrester, etc. And they were basically speaking to the responsibility now of, the board of directors responsible, and before board of directors, the executive team, right? So you said something very interesting that's got my brain running. So before there was a CIO, then there was a chief information officer, then there's chief information security officer, and with the different, and then there was a legal representative, right? And so before, when we talked about risk, that more went under legal,
Yes.
you know? And so there was some idea of, who's handling this hot potato, really? Is it security officers? Is it really legal? Is this really an IT thing and dealing with the chief information officer, right? That's one area. And then second is from the board standpoint, they would just kind of stay back, and now we realize that boards can actually be sued. A lawsuit can be brought toward the board themselves. So now the board of directors had to figure out, who's really managing this, and are people communicating very well to the board so that they get a clear understanding, like you were just stating just now, because sometimes things can get murky and there's no real delineation. So
exactly.
So the question I have around all of that is, how are you seeing that adjustment when it comes to who is actually taking on the responsibility on these executive teams when it comes to cybersecurity, and when it comes to governance and risk?
Well, so far I think the landscape is actually changing in terms of the requirements. There are certain, for example, within the United States, there are certain organizations, I'm not able to recall. I mean, I've read so many articles, so many, but I can say that boards, to some extent, know, even CEOs, there has to be persons who are actually knowledgeable of cybersecurity. I mean, risk to a great extent in terms of actually, so the overall restructuring of boards in terms of responsibilities within organizations are actually taking a new paradigm, a new structuring approach in terms of regulations, in terms of the requirements. If it is that you want to operate on an international level, then your board of management, the structure of your organization in terms of CISO, CEOs, CTO, the CFO, all of these, structures have to be in place, properly defined.
One thing I did want to speak to is you have courses that you do, right? That basically teach on governance, risk, and compliance, and teach on cybersecurity. Tell me more about your courses and what you're doing there.
Thanks for pointing that out. Well, these courses are pretty much my own way of actually giving back in terms of, if you do, the concept behind all of this is that if you do not make space for new knowledge, then the knowledge that you have would actually become obsolete. So that's my way of unleashing, giving back, sharing my experience. So I just let it all out in courses to give back to the community. That's the best way of actually sharing my knowledge, so that I know I have the time to actually learn new things. So I actually develop all of these courses to make them as practical, as applicable, so that persons can actually add all of these items to their resumes to say, look, I did this course, I am able to do X, I'm able to do Y. I'm able to go into organization, for example, to carry out a practical ransomware risk assessment or some assessment.
So your courses kind of help guide through some tangible, actionable practices that they'll see on a day-to-day.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so that once they go through your courses, that they'll feel more confident that now they can either have an interview, or even that they can take a job and actually do that job on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, so at least to set that foundation. And one of the things about my course is that there's always that open connection with me. So it's not a case of I just designing these courses, place them on Udemy or whichever platform, and then there's that disconnect. My LinkedIn is always flooding with requests, having one meetings, group meetings about course content, what it is that they do not understand, sharing, giving back as much as I can. So that's one of the things I do as well.
Okay, great, wonderful. Is there anything else that you want to tell me about Richie? Anything else that you want to share?
Well, one of the things I am really passionate about in terms of working with organizations, taking that time to help organizations to build their various GRC programs, their cybersecurity programs, to actually help them to operate as safely and as securely as best as possible. That's where my passion is right now. Working with the various teams, executives, management, sitting down, having those conversations, moving from conversations into practical implementation, and to actually see things happening, see organizations progressing. I mean, having those incident response plan in place, those business continuity plans. So that's where my passion is